I left the city, I've been browsing. Treading water that they drowning. My head on a swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 110 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_DadFF. Guys, this is episode 110, 10 players to buy in week 10. And we like to do these episodes. I mean, we were telling you guys who to buy in the offseason. If you guys did that, you guys hit big. I mean, you hit on Hollywood, you hit on Pittman, you hit on ETN, you hit on all of these guys that we put it out there. Right now, we're at that point, we're at week 10, right? So we really got to separate the men from the boys or the women from the girls. You know, we got to make sure we have a 2% listenership there now, John. I saw you agreeing. But, we have to figure out right now, are we a contender or are we a pretender? Are we buying this way, you're buying that way? I mean, right now, that week's 8 through 12 is when you can really make some monster deals that can really just echo across your dynasty landscape, and I'm excited to break this down. We got the band back together. Mung's on, John's on. John, how you doing tonight? And this is just an awesome time of year for me because I'm gonna share all the guys that we're talking about trading. I've literally made trades for almost any of them across the Smash Accept leagues, 7 leagues. I've seen 14 trades today alone. It has been a super active day.
Yeah, I do love this time of year. You could just feel everything ramping. Things are getting a little bit more tense. The pressure's starting to mount if you're contending, and you're trying to make these moves right now, either for your playoff run or for your rebuild. And so tonight we're going to throw out buys, like you said, for both. And I got to tell you, my DMs are increasing. People are coming at me more like, hey, what do you think about this move for my contender? Or, hey, I'm really looking at these 23 rookies. And I'm looking at both right now. As you know, first place in Smash 1, dead last in Smash 5. And that's where you want to be.
First or last, right? It's totally Ricky Bobby right there.
Yeah.
And Mung, I mean, same thing. I know you're always updating ranks and doing those things, but I mean, this is the time of year where it's depending on, you can really just make a good trade partner, right? If you are moving your way out of it, you can improve somebody else. And we talk about trade etiquette all the time. And if you're moving, into it, I mean, there's so many opportunities for trades. Week 1 through 6, we're all in that grind mode. We all think we can win. Now, Mung, this is just a fun time. And this is why we have so many trades on our plate and just I'm exuberant, just ready to talk about it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of value to be made potentially in this time period during the season because you might have some 6-3 teams who are, the number 2 seed right now on paper. But when you look at injuries that have hit them recently, their buys coming up, you really expect their picks to be a bit earlier than that. Mm-hmm. Or on the contrary, you have teams that are 2-7 who aren't doing too hot, but, they've got players who are starting to heat up who might still make a playoff run. So those are the teams that you want to really try and evaluate as closely as you can to really try and project where their picks can end up and whether or not it's worth trading for them.
Yeah, and this is one thing that, I've been hearing a lot about trade etiquette in the Smash Accept Patreon. And this is the time of year where, you don't want to come across so many people well, your team isn't, you got no chance, you should be buying these guys, or you should be doing this. And I just want to keep encouraging you guys. Every single trade opportunity is something that you can build on for future trades. And it's also a way that you can, adversely affect your trades going forward. When you have that negative conversation, which I've seen in multiple leagues, that can really deter your next move. And then they're going to trade that player to your opponent because of the way you're, going about things. So the first guy, I want to jump right into it because we got so many guys we want to talk about. The first guy was my second biggest running back buy in the offseason. Right now, he's done nothing but be the RB8 overall, and that's Rhamondre Stevenson. I mean, if you look from weeks 3 on, he has been RB8, 22, 14, 2, 5, 10, 9. My man's putting up 15 to 25 points a game, and it's been fantastic. He is on pace now for what we knew the receptions were going to be there, right? 66 receptions, 429 yards is what he's on pace for. But he's on pace for 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. I mean, Ramondre Stevenson is someone right now that I was buying in the offseason for a second-round pick, and now he's someone that I'm buying right now as well. And I think it is buying high, but at the same time, and John, you and I talked a lot about our rebuilds and our punts, and because Ramondre Stevenson was on all of them because he was that perfect build for that. And we talked about, is he worth a first or is he worth a second? And we made some trades in there. For me, I mean, I have Ramondre Stevenson right on the fringe of being a dynasty RB1 because of his age, because of his production. And I know we can talk about Bill Belichick, and the things that he does, but it's Ram built tough season. He has been fantastic when he's been on the field. He has, since week 2, after that, he has been phenomenal. And I want to talk quick about a trade that I made today with Dynasty Zoltan. So he really wants Amon-Ra St. Brown off my team. My team has stud wide receivers. I mean, I am loaded at the wide receiver position, but I wanted to solidify, my running backs. So what I did was I gave him Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he offered me, I wanted his 201 and Ramondre Stevenson. We ultimately settled on what now is the 205, Ramondre Stevenson, and a 23 third, and then he gets Amon-Ra St. Brown and a 24 third. So the thirds, I just wanted to move up a little bit. We talk about no matter what position you're in this time of year, just get that little bit extra. Sometimes you can do that just to move forward. And basically, the way I'm looking at it is Amon-Ra St. Brown had 2 really great weeks, right? And he has struggled since. Ramondre Stevenson has done nothing but ball out, and I think he's young enough that this is a move that could, put myself where I could have went out there and tried to buy one of the older running backs, but I think Stevenson is a guy that is going to be primed for not just this year, but next year, John.
Oh, definitely. I think he's really the perfect example right now that you can use on a contender, especially with Damian Harris out and New England wanting to run the ball. And he's great for rebuilds. Like you said, we had him on just about every punt and rebuild. I ended up moving him for what appears to be like a really early second. And I may have settled there, but I'm trying to get potential points off my team. And I see that Ramondre is balling out here. So that was my only concern at the time. I didn't want to risk getting Bijan. But I really love him for both. And I think it's a great trade that you made.
And Mung, I know the biggest criticism in the past has been the New England running backs and what's Belichick going to do. And right now, I mean, Stevenson and McCaffrey are the only guys with 500-plus yards and 200-plus receiving yards. I mean, he is someone that looks to be a staple of that offense. Damian Harris on the flip side, I tried to get him thrown in the deal, right? Because Damian Harris is a free agent next year. Damian Harris, you want to have a guy, he in the playoffs last year stepped up big. He was a solid RB2 the entire time. How do you see things shaking out there? And talk to me a little bit about the trade.
Yeah, in your instance, I think I actually prefer the Amon-Ra St. Brown side. For me, I know that Stevenson's been really good the last few weeks, but when you look at the snap share with and without Damian Harris, I think it's pretty clear that Stevenson is the more talented back in that backfield at this point, and that he should be the 1A going forward. But at the same time, he's been super lucky with the receiving touchdowns. And then the other worry is that when Harris was back against the Jets a couple weeks ago, it really turned into more of a 60-40 split, with Stevenson still getting the 60. So I think this is still a committee going forward once Harris is back healthy. I know he's been in and out with an ankle injury and then the illness. But in general, personally, I would still take a first-round pick over Stevenson. For rest of season production, I'm not quite sure that he's going to be that top 12 running back that he has been when Harris has been out.
He only has 1 receiving touchdown that came this past week. The receptions have been there, but that's the biggest thing that I'm looking at is you are still at least for that particular team. I mean, I have Austin Eckler, I have Joe Mixon, I have Derrick Henry, so he's a luxury flex play that I think gives you that upside. And I'm not, that's one where some people are really high on Amon-Ra St. Brown, and we've gone back and forth on that. John or Mung, who's a running back that you guys are buying right now? Because I feel like right now, the way to really separate yourself, there are running backs out there that are cheap, and we've been talking about them in the last couple of weeks. Some of those guys that you can go out there and can solidify your team, or maybe even a veteran that you can go up and pay top dollar, but you know they're going to win you a championship?
Yeah, I'll throw out one for rebuild and one for contender. Starting with the contender, I've talked so much about Derrick Henry. I still think you could get Derrick Henry for relatively cheap. He's the number 2 running back on points per game on average and still balling. By the way, his playoff schedule looks pretty nice. He starts with the 30th ranked LA Chargers and the dead last Houston Texans in weeks 15 and 16. Unfortunately, he has Dallas in week 17, but just keep that in mind for those first couple weeks of the playoffs. But moving on, Cordarrelle Patterson for me still can be had for very cheap. And what we were concerned about with him was, is he going to kind of fizzle out towards the end of the season? He's an older back, no question. But actually, spending 4 weeks on IR may have actually helped him kind of come back with fresh legs, and he may actually be able to kind of keep it going here. I mean, if you watch the game, he was looking great.
Yeah.
He was a huge part of the offense. They run the ball more than anyone in the NFL right now. Committed to that. He just trucked a guy on one of his rushing touchdowns. Go look that one up. I'll have to post it. But he's looking great. Why not go pick him up for cheap?
And
so that,
what I've tried on all my contenders, I have offered a pair of thirds, and that's not getting it done. Everybody wants that. No one's paying a 23-2, but it feels like everybody wants
that's what 24-2. It might take.
And is a 24-2 worth it for you? I think yes.
I think so,
especially if you're a contender. You know, you go out there and you throw a 24-second that's potentially going to be late. You know, and I think that's kind of that territory where I think he is a great buy for that. Mung, who's one of those running backs that you're going out there and just kicking the tires, trying to make an attempt to go out there and buy someone?
Yeah, I'll definitely second John's suggestion of Cordarrelle Patterson, especially because of how run-heavy that Falcons offense has been and will continue to be with Arthur Smith. I would go out and buy Eli Mitchell, who's kind of a forgotten-about name ever since he got hurt in week 1. And, you can get him as a throw-in right now. You can probably get him for a third-round rookie pick in a lot of leagues. I recently acquired Jacoby Myers and Eli Mitchell for a 2024 second.
Oh, I love that.
He's a guy where, again, obviously Christian McCaffrey is the guy in San Francisco. They traded a lot to get him, and it's going to be super fun to watch McCaffrey. But knock on wood, he's had a long injury history. There's a reason people were nervous about drafting him in redraft early in the first round this preseason. And for me, Mitchell coming off of IR, if McCaffrey were to miss any time at all, Mitchell steps into a potential top 15, top 10 running back production. We know that he's done it in the past, last year as a rookie when there was nobody else there, and they traded away Jeff Wilson. So they're comfortable with the running backs they have on the roster. And I expect Mitchell to get some work even with McCaffrey healthy and to be the clear lead if McCaffrey were to miss any time.
Dude, I absolutely love that because we've been saying where you want that guy behind Christian McCaffrey, and you
next man up,
the next man up. And I'm glad that you brought up Jeff Wilson because Jeff Wilson, coaching staff in Miami from San Francisco, they're like, let's go get Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson jumps in, and week 1, 9 carries, 51 yards. That's almost 6 yards per carry, 3 receptions, 21 yards, and a touchdown. And guys, Jeff Wilson over the last 17 games, we're looking at in his career, 200 carries, 975 yards, 12 touchdowns, 203 receiving yards. I mean, Jeff Wilson is that guy every single year, week 15. He feels like he just finds his way into a starting role. I have made 3 purchases this week for a 24 third that's going to be late. I think, the only other guy there right now is Mostert. And I think Mostert is somehow on borrowed time. Jeff Wilson could be that guy that just could be an RB2 for literally no cost at all. And I think you can get him thrown in trades. You can give up a 24 third. There's no, if you are not a contender, Jeff Wilson is one of those guys where you're like, I don't really need him on my roster, right? But if you are in a contending mode, I mean, you can't overlook the fact that what he's done when he gets an opportunity. He has just 9 times out of 10, he goes out there and he gets it done.
Yeah, Raheem Mostert's like, this guy again? I can't get away from Jeff Wilson. He's following me around the league. But to your point, Mike McDaniels knows exactly what he's getting coming from San Francisco. He knows the system. He can plug this guy in. and Raheem Mostert hasn't exactly been a bill of health. So I do like that one as well. And if you can get him for 24th, third, man, I like that one for the stretch run. You want to give yourself options at running back. It's key.
You
to
want to
make
have
it down
those
the
wide
stretch.
receivers solidified, and then just get those wild cards. We keep talking about that. All those lottery tickets that are sitting
That's
there.
right.
You know, I mean, Powerball's sitting at 2.3 billion now, but I mean, Jeff Wilson isn't quite worth that.
Okay.
But I think you want those lottery tickets. And I was looking at next gen stats. I mean, Jeff Wilson is tied for 7th among all running backs this season with a plus 119 rushing yards over expected. I mean, like in his career, 30% of his touches have produced first downs. He just is a good football player, right? Like there's nothing flashy about him. He just gets it done. 24th, third, go out there and get him on your contender. Someone that's going to cost you more and that I absolutely love, and I know it was hot take several months ago. It's hot take still. Travis Etienne has been balling out, right? I mean, he has looked fantastic. He is an RB1 right now. I mean, over the last 3 weeks, RB2 in expected fantasy points, RB5 in opportunity share, RB3 in rushing share, RB4 in half-point PPR. I mean, he is someone that I think, given the dynasty landscape right now, there's a lot of guys in the Patreon that are saying, they're making deals where they're getting Etienne in a second for Jonathan Taylor, and I'm for it. I mean, I know that sounds crazy 3 months ago, right? I mean, if you would have said that, people would have just been like, no, absolutely not. But since James Robinson was traded, we're looking at the snap share went from 47% to now it's at 80%, and he was those 3 weeks. He's been RB8, RB7, RB3 against tougher opponents, in the Giants, in Denver. Both of those are, teams that have not given up crazy amounts of points to the running back position. And he's about to blow up, right? Like he has 11 receptions for 93 scoreless yards over his combined last couple of weeks. He's been doing it all on the ground. I mean, if you look, he has 114, 156, 109, and 4 touchdowns over that time. But the receptions haven't been there, and we know that is a big part of his game. I think Travis Etienne, I'm still willing to buy on the high, and I did make a trade this week. Again, trying to just we don't just say things like when we're saying this is who we're buying, this is what we're doing. Literally, we're sharing what we do, and I know you guys are the exact same way. The deal that I was able to get done last week was I traded Antonio Gibson and a late 23 first for Etienne in a third. And it was the last piece of the puzzle. Again, I have Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, I have Tyreek Hill, I have Diggs, Eckler, Mixon. This is that final flex piece where for me, Gibson is just an added value. I'm using Antonio Gibson to just improve a player somewhere because I hate saying it, but it's like almost RIP Antonio Gibson time. And I think Travis Etienne is going to win you leagues this year. Somebody yell at me. Somebody bring me back down to earth.
Yeah, I have no issue with that. I have him in my latest update for the Dynasty rankings. I have him at RB3, just above Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, and Kenneth Walker. So he's in that tier where, when they're healthy, these guys seem to be the clear workhorses for their teams. And I mean, like you said, 80% snap share since James Robinson was traded away. Clearly, Jacksonville staff trusts him and Trevor Lawrence trusts him. And there are very few workhorses at this point in the NFL. And if you have one of them, it's a huge advantage in fantasy every single week.
See, I love that because I was like, I thought I was going real hot takey by saying by the end of the year, it'll be the RB2, and I think it's going to be Saquon and Etienne. I like the coaching change potentially for Jonathan Taylor. I like him having, but I'm just a little bit worried about, there's so much talk in the Patreon. I've seen 5 or 6 trades done this exact same way. And another just plug for that because guys in there are making trades, we're seeing it, and then all of a sudden it's a copycat. Everybody's like, yo, Nerd Boy got this trade done, or John got this trade done, or Mung got this trade. And then we go to our other leagues and try to do the same thing. And, it's just been a great soundboard to try to think about thought processes and stuff like that. And I think Travis Etienne is just that guy that's going to win you leagues.
Yeah, I definitely like the Gibson and 23 first trade better than the JT one. But I think both you could definitely justify the value. Now, really the preferable way to get this guy was back when you were saying to grab him in the
Right.
offseason. Now he's kind of a buy high type scenario, but still, I do like it. I will say this. I looked at his playoff schedule. It's a little challenging. He's got Dallas there in week 15, but if you've got a bye, you're getting the Jets in week 16. Here's where it gets nice, though. If you can make it to the final in week 17, Houston, dead last against the run.
Yeah.
So that could be a league winner right there. I was going to throw in a couple of other running back buys that I have just to sprinkle these in for the listeners on a rebuild.
Yeah,
I
let's do
really,
it.
I like Rashad White.
Love
and his
that.
I really
Love
like that one. Khalil Herbert and Zamir White were the other guys I was going to throw in, but keen in on Rashad White. This is like buy this guy before he blows. I'm just looking at Tampa Bay and where they're going as a franchise. I think it's fairly obvious Tom Brady's going to move on, or at least he should. They might actually push him out this time. And Leonard Fournette, he's kind of on a cheap contract. He could stay, but really, if you're in rebuild mode as a franchise, maybe they draft or go get another quarterback. You could see them really just moving to Rashad White. And there's even rumors that he might even pass up Leonard Fournette this year. Like some beat writers are already talking about it. So you want to make these moves before that happens. I'm not saying it's going to happen down the stretch of this season, but next season you could convince yourself. And he's actually looked pretty good this year. Certainly the pass catching role he's really picked up well, but his pass blocking and running between the tackles have also looked good, and he's even scored. So I like the trajectory of that guy.
And I think I'm willing to go out there and pay a 23-second for him.
Yeah, I think
because
so.
I feel like you have a win-win scenario of maybe he's the starter next year because they're not going to be drafting another running back potentially with how the capital they put in him, or Leonard Fournette goes down, and there is a definite scenario here where, given the fact that he plays Arizona and Carolina in the playoffs, that I think if he takes over, he's an RB2.
Look out.
He's a guy that has RB1 upside, and he has those pass catching abilities. We've seen it like in the KC game, 5 for 5 on his targets for receptions, 50 yards. He's a guy that can go out there and put up some major points. So I like that a lot. And Zamir White. I mean, we preach it all the time. It's go get that next guy. We've been talking about Herbert. You've been able to get him in the offseason because we were talking about that. There's always that next guy up, and that's where you want to just fill that bench with that. Because last year, and I know it's a cautionary tale, but like I was stacking teams up, and I lost to a guy in the championship because he threw Rashad Penny. He threw who else? Chuba, I think, was down the stretch.
Dante Foreman, maybe.
Foreman. Like all these guys. Jeff Wilson's in that mix. Like there's these guys that just they get their opportunity in week 15, 16, 17. They can really pay off big dividends. Mung, is there any other running backs you'd like to touch on before we move on to the next position?
Yeah, almost a cheaper version of Rashad White for me is Michael Carter, because not only does he have a similar receiving role with the Jets, but he could just hold on to that lead position. Even with the trade for James Robinson, Robinson hasn't been particularly efficient this year. That might have been more of a depth move than anything else. And Carter's been pretty good, both as a rookie last year before they drafted Hall and since Hall's injury. I mean, they're still using him quite a bit. And again, if Robinson were to miss any time, Carter could easily become a near workhorse like he was towards the end of last season when he was a rookie.
I like it. The next one I want to talk about, I want to go to the wide receiver position here a little bit. There's two guys I made a trade today, and I'm in so many smash leagues that I thought it was another league, but I just rolled with it. But we, Jared Salbridi and I flip-flopped Brandon Ayuk and Jerry Jeudy. And I think both of these guys are guys that I am buying. I think both of them right now. Jerry Jeudy has had back-to-back wide receiver 2 weeks, and if you look at the schedule, and I know we want to it's cringe to talk about Russell Wilson, but if you look at the schedule as far as what Jerry Jeudy has going down the stretch, he has been, back-to-back wide receiver 2 weeks. Now we look at their schedule, and if you look at it, and I love Sleeper HQ, they have literally put it out there where you can see the ranks each week. You can see what they do. Guys, if you look at it, they were on bye last week, and I love seeing the breakdown in colors. It's straight green. it is straight green the entire way down. And that means we're looking at top 10, potential scoring from the wide receiver position, and he gets Tennessee and Las Vegas and Carolina, Baltimore, KC, Arizona. I think the ceiling is there for Jerry Jeudy to finish out strong, whether you want to go Jeudy or Sutton. I think the real question is, and I saw some people talking about Russell Wilson, and possibly buying in there, but I'm buying Jeudy. But I saw a Russell Wilson trade that I got to talk over with you guys. This happened in Smash Accept 4. So if you guys are ready for that, Dino Fisherman gets Russell Wilson and Dameon Pierce and Melvin Gordon. And Dollar Will gets Geno Smith, Jamal Williams, and Tony Pollard. To me, this just screams that Russell Wilson is really, really cheap. And I know it hasn't been pretty, but what do you guys want to break this one down for me a little bit? And I've been wanting Jerry Jeudy to break out. You guys have known I've been wanting that for the longest time, and I feel like we're on the cusp here if we can get some solid play from Russell Wilson.
Go ahead. What do you think, Mon?
Yeah, give me the players one more time.
It's Russell Wilson, Dameon Pierce, and Melvin Gordon. The other side is Geno Smith, Jamal Williams, and Tony Pollard.
Ooh, that one is tough. I think, honestly, rest of season, I prefer Geno Smith slightly over Russell Wilson for fantasy purposes. Yeah. But I definitely still want Pierce. Overall, I think it's a pretty fair deal in general. But
well, Geno Smith is a great point because you can still get Geno Smith for a 24-second. And right now he is the QB7. And I think he is that prototypical guy, right, where you might have two QB1s, but if you can get him for a 24-second, that's somebody you can throw in potentially to. He's had several QB1 weeks. I mean, he's there where he's been top 5 a couple of weeks. I think Geno is a great buy low. It's a temporary thing. He's probably going to get replaced, but if they keep winning, who knows?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So you kind of stole my thunder on this one, but Geno is definitely my contender buy at QB. Yeah, 7-8 on the season, depending on settings, and they just keep kind of finding a way to win, and they're dropped all the way down the draft order for next year. And so, are you going to kind of roll the dice with maybe a QB that's still available later in the first round, or wait around and address other types of positions on that team? And he might just convince the management there to continue going with them and build around them. I mean, he's looked great with Kenneth Walker. He still has DK and Lockett.
Yeah, and there's other things in that lineup that are more necessary. There are other things there in Seattle, and we know that, Pete Carroll likes to win, and we're probably not investing in an early round quarterback because they've been playing solid, so I think that's a great buy. And I think, would you pay a 23-second? I mean, you're our guy where you're our guy when it comes to the 23 class. And if you guys haven't seen John's threads, they've been straight fire. He's got the background there of his 23 guys. He might change his name to something catchy with 23 in here.
Yeah.
But are you willing to pay a 23-second, let's call it mid?
Okay. I think I'd consider it. If you're a contender, now's the time to start using your picks. And you always want to keep the picks that are gaining in value to continue to build your team. But if you need a QB, I'm okay moving a 23-second mid. And one of the reasons I feel that way is you're probably not going to get a really strong starter caliber QB at that point in the rookie draft next year. They're going to be off the board most likely. You're certainly not having any chance at Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, even in a 1 QB rookie draft. Those guys are probably off the board by then. So you're looking at this next wave of QBs, Hendon Hooker or Will Levis or one of these guys. And even by then in Superflex drafts, if those guys get drafted in the first round, they're probably off the board. Even if they're not, they really haven't shown a whole lot yet to convince me that they're going to, like I said, be starters in the NFL. So you're not really missing out by moving that 23-second. You're not really missing out on a good chance to get a better QB in Superflex. It's one of the reasons why I'd be okay making that move as a contender. And again, I'm looking at Geno's playoff schedule. He's got San Francisco 10th against QBs, but then he gets KC in the second round, 28th. against the pass and QBs, and then you get the Jets. So kind of a mixed bag there, but decent options for him in the playoffs as well.
And the other guy in that trade that I was talking about, and I'm going out there, he seems to be criminally undervalued in the dynasty community. He has been a wide receiver 2 repeatedly. And since the Christian McCaffrey trade, he's been wide receiver 4, wide receiver 18, wide receiver 11. So, I mean, we're looking at, he has been peppered. And I think, obviously, Debo's been out.
That's right.
But on the season, you gotta look at, I mean, Brandon Ayuk is the wide receiver 21. But I think, given the fact that he's 24 years old, he's on an offense that's going to score a lot of points, I'm okay going out there and buying him. I mean, I'm not paying a first, but I think you can get him for a second and a little bit of add-on there, and I think Brandon Ayuk is someone I like buying a guy that's 24 years old with that second-round pick, so I don't necessarily have to, go all in with a guy that, an Adam Thielen type or a guy that's, a little bit less longevity here in their career. Mung, what are some wide receivers that you're going out there and buying? I mean, right now is the time that, we talked about getting those lottery tickets for your running back position, but your wide receiver position, you want to solidify it, right? You want to say, these are my 2 or 3 wide receivers that I'm going to start every week, and then I got to have some other guys to mix in there, but you want to have that solid because you don't want to have a whole roster full of wide receivers of who's going to hit this week, who's going to hit next week, who's that guy. So tell me about a couple wide receivers that you're looking at.
Yeah, well, sticking with the injury theme with Eli Mitchell, who's been on IR, I'll go with Marquise Brown, who before DeAndre Hopkins, when he was suspended, Marquise Brown, when he was healthy over the first 5 games, he was the wide receiver 7 in PPR points per game, just on an absolute tear. And I know that Hopkins coming back is going to worry some people about the potential target volume, but with Arizona being, the fastest pace of any team in the NFL, I think there's going to be plenty of targets to go around for both of these guys. So for me, I like Marquise Brown a lot, who probably will cost you probably a late first in a lot of leagues. Probably get him fairly cheap. And then if you really want to go,
I don't even think it's going to cost you a 23 first. I think you can get him for a 24 first, is what I've been seeing. Mm-hmm. I've been seeing that everywhere, where it's like everybody wants to win so bad that's a great point, because we've been talking about him, especially on your rebuild teams. He's a great guy there, and I know Kyler has looked a little bit better the last couple weeks. I mean, that's been an interesting scenario, and I know we had that a little bit later on the docket, but I mean, Kyler Murray, I know, is someone that you're interested in buying as well.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes with the theme, right? Because Kyler Murray, like you said, has been playing better. And even though there's still a lot of issues with that Arizona team, and penalties have just been absolutely killing them, imagine what you can do once you have Brown and Hopkins, right? And then you've got Rondale Moore in the slot. That's really just going to open up the offense a whole lot more for Kyler Murray. And even though people are talking like he's been a disappointment this year, he's quietly been the QB6 in fantasy points per game on the year. So it's not like he's been bad. I think people just had such high expectations for him among that top tier of quarterbacks that they're disappointed in what's been actually a very good season so far.
Well, and I think we do that a lot, right? We like it almost like the post-hype sleeper. You believe in a guy so much that you want them to be a top 2, and if they're not, you move them back into that area. Mm-hmm. We're just going to keep vibing with this, but I'm buying, and this is going to sound crazy because now we're at a spot where the price has gone up, but Justin Fields, I think, is going to move himself into that same area as Kyler Murray by the time the season is over. I mean, I have just been blown away by how good he's played. And I know he's running for his life sometimes, and we're getting things there. But, I mean, he's the QB8 right now, and I think I would, and this might sound crazy, but I would rather have Fields in a second over Kyler right now. I'm just worried about Kyler Murray with all the blow-ups on the sidelines and things like that, where Fields is just running mad right now. I mean, since we look at, he has been the QB1 over the last 5 weeks, and over that time, he has ran for at least 50 yards in every single game. This past week, almost breaking the record with 178 yards. He scored in almost every single game on the ground. He's, the last 2 weeks, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. And we were talking about it before where it was like, you had Lance, you had Fields, and you had Lawrence, and no one's really asserted themselves right now. But Justin Fields has to be moving up your dynasty rankings. I mean, he just has to be. And I'm always trying to get ahead of that curve, and I've been trying to buy him where it was like, hey, can I give up Kyler plus and move back? Or I'm sorry, can I get Fields plus for Kyler? And I've seen it, and we just had a trade in one of our leagues. But am I crazy for saying that too, right? This is that time of year where you're like, you're trying to add that value. You're trying to get things in there. If I'm a contender, I'm right on the fence there because he has been literally that good for 5 straight weeks. And he has a really good schedule. I mean, week 17, he plays Detroit. Like, that is the ultimate game that you want, right? I mean, he has Detroit coming up this week. He has Detroit coming up week 17.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth looking at. I definitely think the time to buy was a few weeks back on the
Correct.
dip. I actually did pick up a share or two. So now you're having to pay quite a bit more after he blows up. And I have to disagree with Mike McDaniel, who told him to stop scrambling on the sideline. If you saw this interaction against Miami, I'm like, no, keep scrambling because you're just piling up the points. My goodness gracious. It's incredible to kind of watch him develop like that. I think you could make a statement now that he is worth the most out of anyone in the 21 QB class, and that includes Trevor Lawrence because of his scrambling and rushing capability. And I think there's every reason to believe that Chicago is going to invest more around him in the upcoming draft. They have, a couple of higher picks. Imagine that they get one of his teammates like JSN and give him another weapon or two to throw to. That could be pretty exciting. So I definitely think it's worth kind of buying a little bit on the higher side. I like those moves that you mentioned. What do you think, Mong?
Yeah, and I think the problem is people were overreacting, right, during the early part of the season because in my latest update, which is, what is it, early November now? This year's flown by. I have Fields at QB 10 in Dynasty. Okay. I could see an argument for him as high as QB 6 or 7, but in my October update, Fields was, he was QB 14, so he hadn't moved down much. And in August preseason, even though we knew that the Bears offense was not going to be good but at the same time, we knew about his rushing potential, I had Fields at QB 13. So he never should have moved down that much just from the early few games where they were super run heavy because we knew the ceiling was there. So yeah, if you bought during that dip, then congratulations because his value never should have dipped that much.
And I think a lot of people are comparing it to a Jalen Hurts type thing, where he's starting to understand it year 2 and he's got that running thing there where you could be looking at a guy year 3 adding some weapons, maybe adding to the offensive line. That offensive line is disgusting, but you might be looking at a similar type situation, and I would always rather buy high and a guy hit like that where you can get a little bit added on and see where you're at, when it comes to quarterbacks. Speaking of which, a trade just got done in one of my leagues, and it's like Jacob Saunders got Justin Fields in a late 23 first for Jamar Chase and Jahan Dotson. So, I mean, that is some big money when you're talking about Jamar Chase. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say with that. I will look up where that first is right now because this literally just happened, a little bit right before the podcast, and I was like still trying to digest it. But we're looking at Jamar Chase and a 23 first, or Justin Fields and a 23 first, or Jamar Chase and Jahan Dotson. We'll start with you, John. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm actually not quite that high on Justin Fields yet. I would be up. I think it's really interesting to see someone pay with, one of the top positional players in all of Dynasty, along with Jahan Dotson, who's actually on my list of buys for rebuilds because he's been kind of out of sight, out of mind. He's still 110. Okay, the 110 on the Chase, on the Field side, Fields and the 110. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting after the performances we just saw with Fields. He's definitely worth a lot more in terms of market value now, but to me, not that much. Chase is still going to go ahead of this guy in startups, in my opinion. And I think you can make an argument that Jahan Dotson is kind of in that same range as the the late first, early second range.
Yeah, and Dotson's cheap. I can't.
Yeah, I'd go get him.
Too cheap. He started out really well. Mung, we were talking about. I mean, like I was saying, I think he ascends into that second tier, maybe QB 6, 7 by the time the season's over, and we know that that's kind of in that same area where Chase was going this year. I mean, is this a scenario where you're buying high on Fields and it might pan out? And then John, you were talking about, at that 110 area, you're looking at a wide receiver, maybe Addison or something in that range. There's some nice wide receiver, maybe not that good, but that's an interesting area. Yep. Mung, talk to me a little bit about this trade, because I've had a lot of people talking about Chase. Last week we were talking about that trade where it was Wilson and 2 firsts, and I've had 2 or 3 people you reach out and say, hey, is that what you want to do? What are we doing here with Ja'Marr Chase?
I like it a lot. Right now in Superflex, we're really seeing this season that it's the haves and have-nots at quarterback, right? Because really there are a lot of veteran quarterbacks that have declined significantly, and there are a lot of younger quarterbacks that just aren't looking particularly good, or at least not productive in fantasy. So right now, if you look at my rankings, in Superflex formats, in Dynasty, I have Ja'Marr Chase ranked 12th overall, and I have Justin Fields ranked 16th overall. So I like this trade a lot. Because like I said, if Fields just continues to run, even if he's not the best passer yet, even though they're starting to add some weapons, I could easily see him ascending into that Burrow-Watson tier, which I have slightly above Chase. So I think this is getting ahead of the curve of what we're expecting Fields' market value to be, 4-6 weeks down the line, if he continues putting up top 10 production based on his rushing. So, yeah, I like this trade a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely going ahead, and it's predictive, and if he does get into that tier, in that second tier, we're at an area where it's like I would take a 23 first, even a late one over Dotson. But, I think it's a fun trade, definitely worth something, going out there and kicking the tires. A wide receiver that I'm interested in right now, and a lot of people, he just has a negative connotation just because of what he's done in the past. But Christian Kirk is quietly the wide receiver 10 right now, and I think he's had a lot of up and down games. But Christian Kirk is someone that you can still buy for a 23 second. You might be able to do a 24 second and a DJ Chark, or someone that's like, you're just throwing in a guy that's on IR or doing something in that particular manner. But I mean, he's had some really nice games. And like I said, I mean, you're looking at, he has had 21 this past week against Las Vegas. And when Trevor Lawrence looks good, Christian Kirk has put up some solid numbers, and I'm buying him cheap. I have no problem with that as well of like, he's my wide receiver 4, and I can kind of throw him in. Yeah. John just threw up in his mouth.
Yeah, no, I think he's kind of like a pretty safe wide receiver 2 every week, and they paid this guy. So they're going to utilize him, and Jacksonville's often playing from behind, and he's just kind of the guy that's constantly underrated, almost like a Brandon Cooks type of player that you could buy always cheaper than he's actually producing, right?
Dude,
that's what
such
you want.
A great comparison there, because it's like, I don't ever see a scenario where Christian Kirk's worth a first, no matter what.
Well, and we mentioned Jacoby Myers earlier, another great example of outproduces the perceived market value. So those are good buys.
Wide receiver 3s.
If you can get flex wide receiver 3s, I definitely like those. On the rebuild side, there's a couple other guys that I think are still pretty cheap. I like Wan'Dale Robinson.
Love that.
He's
good.
Yeah, he really has. And they shipped out Kadarius Toney. They might actually continue to upgrade the offense. Might even get a new QB next year. So that's another one. And then I hope I'm not stealing anything from Mung on the injury theme, but man, it's still wide. Jameson Williams. And I think this guy is just, I think we talk about him nearly every week, but it's still a good time to buy Jameson Williams. Go do it.
You could do a 24 first and you're going to get him.
Oh my gosh, do it in a heartbeat.
He's not going to cost you a 23 first. I think I've been selling my Amon-Ra St. Brown shares, and I've been trying to get Jameson Williams. And I think there's almost a scenario where you could get Jameson and a 24 first for Amon-Ra St. Brown in some instances. Like
Wow.
I've seen similar trades in there. You might have to throw in a little bit more, and that just blows my mind because I feel like that is just way too cheap. Mung, any other wide receivers? I mean, I know I wanted to talk about a guy, but I mean, you have to look at the Cleveland offense, right? Deshaun Watson is coming back
Thank
next
you.
week. Okay, next
Yes.
week. So, one, people are not high enough on Deshaun Watson because I'm seeing people say, well, it's been too long. He's outside my top 10. He should be a top 5 to 8 dynasty quarterback. But what happens to the rest of that offense is what I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, buy everyone on Cleveland, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And because even it doesn't matter, they've been good even with Jacoby Brissett, and so at the very least we have a baseline for them if Watson were to get hurt or whatever reason, suspended even more. But honestly, they've been producing even without Watson, so you're expecting at the very least similar production. And on the high end, if he can return to form after a couple of weeks, Amari Cooper's already been wide receiver 13 in PPR points per game. Njoku, tight end 8 in PPR points per game. So you're getting, top 10 options pretty much with potentially top 5 upside.
I literally 3 minutes ago just traded for David Njoku. I apologize for looking down and being rude, but I traded in Smash 5 a 25 first for David Njoku and Tom Brady. Now I get my QB3 with Tom Brady, and I think David Njoku, right now, he is like you said, the tight end 8, even after missing a game, and that's not points per game, that's like overall. Right now, the tight end landscape, I want Kelsey, I want Andrews, I want Goddard, or I want Njoku. Those are those guys that I have on all my teams, and I'm just like, I'm just excited. I know 25 first. I might not even be alive in 2025. You know what I mean? The way things are going. No, but I mean, like, David
I like
Njoku,
that trade, by the way.
What's that?
Yeah, I like that trade because the guy you traded with, I have his.
You have his first. I know.
His potential points are just going to be
Yo, you're
dropping
welcome.
every week. Thank
help
you.
me,
Yeah,
help you. You know, we
My
got
man,
this
my
here.
man.
Yeah, I
But
love that.
I-
If you're doing
Yeah.
a punt, and I know, guys, if you don't, I mean, John has been like reinvigorated with
Totally.
this so much after doing a punt. If you guys haven't done them, if you can do them again in the offseason for 2024, because I think it's going to be a similar outcome.
Yeah.
But it's like each week I'm sitting there looking, I'm like, where am I first going? You know, like these things are looking sexier and sexier, and that 23
So much
class
fun.
all the time just keeps looking better. But yeah, David Njoku and Amari Cooper are both not valued as if they are getting a huge upgrade at quarterback.
Yeah, I feel
You know,
like
they have
if this
done
was,
well, and now you get Deshaun Watson. It's like, well, it can't go worse. You know, like
Right.
it can't. There might be a little bit of bumps in the road for week 1 and week 2 from them coming back, but I mean, I think both these guys are huge buys, and I think over the next couple of weeks, you know, they get Tampa Bay, they get Houston. You know, they have a couple opportunities here in some big shootouts where I think they're going to have to pass the ball a little bit more.
Yeah, I was going to say, if this Cleveland conversation was a Twitter thread, I'd post the Michael Scott gif of him slamming the table. Thank you. Like, these guys are just so cheap with Deshaun Watson coming back. People haven't thought it through. And I looked it up, too, for the playoffs. Amari gets Baltimore 21st, New Orleans 20th, and then Washington in the championship 30th ranked against wide receivers.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I love that completely. You know, it's just one of those fun scenarios. I want to talk about, we talked about buying high, and I know I've kind of hit that several times on this. Mung's been hitting the injured guys. John's been hitting, you know, rebuilds versus that. I'm buying high on Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, people are just writing off like it's his fault. Keenan Allen has missed basically the entire season. Mike Williams has missed time. You know, he got injured, and after that, I mean, I think there is a buy low window on Justin Herbert, which sounds bizarre because he was in that Patrick Mahomes right underneath Josh Allen tier, and now I'm seeing people trying to sell. They're like, well, you know, as if they're playing the short game of a quarterback that's that good that early, that's just disappearing.
I've been thinking that way the entire time. I actually have Justin Herbert on some redraft teams, and he hasn't really been able to get it done. He used to be like automatic for 300-yard passing every week. But yeah, the weapons aren't there. The line's been banged up.
And
They've been kind of struggling.
He's QB 13, which is not sexy at all, But I mean, if you look,
yeah,
he's just like on the fringe there. And when you get Keenan Allen back, he's got a nice stretch here coming from week 11 to week 15, all bottom 10 pass defenses. I think
it's a good time in general. What I was going to suggest
now, in the offseason, it was you had to pay like Burrow in a second to get to Herbert. I think right now you could sell Burrow and get Herbert in a second if that's your preference. And I think if you're a rebuilding team and you can do that, do it.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to suggest. Exactly that. Like in terms of a strategy here, if you kind of know the tendencies of your league mates and there's a contender sitting there with Herbert that's getting nervous, right? You can just see the sweat building. Can I actually win with Herbert on this contending team? Maybe see if you could float something to that guy and get him someone that's playing a little bit better and more in the QB1 range and get Herbert on to rebuild. Now you're talking. That would be interesting.
Mung, is there anybody else that we really need to add in here? I mean, we have a lot of players that we're talking about buying, a lot of guys to really, set you up for the next couple of weeks because we're trying to hit those schedules. Is there anybody else that you're like, this is someone that I feel like I have to go out there and at least make an offer for?
Yeah, I know we talked about it a little in the Patreon Twitter DM, the group thread, but I think right now you could sell Jamar Chase for Jalen Waddle plus, and someone would think that they took advantage of you by buying low on Chase when really you just bought low on Jalen Waddle, who's currently my number 2 wide receiver in Dynasty, just ahead of Chase. Partially due to the injury, and again, my rankings reflect, more rest of season for contenders, so that factors into a little bit. But even just looking at just the pure talent for Waddle, right, in that Miami offense, where regardless of what happens, we know that the talent is there with Waddle, and that Mike McDaniel is going to feed his playmakers the ball. And then when you look at that surrounding factor, that Waddle is competing with a 29-year-old Tyreek Hill for targets versus Chase competing with a 23-year-old T. Higgins, who's going to be around for much longer. I think that we could see Waddle establish himself closer to the number 1 guy, a la Justin Jefferson, over Jamar Chase for the next couple of years at least.
Ooh, I like it. Spicy.
Yeah.
Staying there. I mean, I'm buying Tyreek Hill too on my contenders because I think Tyreek Hill has just been phenomenal, and I think the age curve is there where people are like, I'm going to sell him ahead of time and try to get out there. But I mean, I have, in a couple leagues, I have Michael Pittman, who I'm a little bit worried about with Sam Erlinger, where I offered it straight up Pittman for Tyreek Hill. I'm in that area. If I can stay in that same zone, I would pay a 23 first plus for Tyreek Hill right now if he was that final piece, because when you have stable play the rest of your roster, but you can have a Tyreek Hill who could put up 40 any single time, that's how you win your dynasty leagues.
Yeah.
You guys want to hear a really gross one that probably nobody wants to actually listen to?
I love how you set that one up. Hey, nice, you guys want to hear something nobody wants to hear? Go for it, man.
Look, you can get Allen Robinson for a 3rd-round rookie pick right now, maybe less. And it's been bad. I'm not even gonna try and pretend that it's been, and look, I was a proponent of Allen Robinson the offseason. Definitely one of my misses. I had plenty of hits, but definitely one of my big misses. And thus far, he's been awful. I don't even know what he is anymore, like wide receiver 80 something on the season in fantasy, probably. But all that being said, he ranks 9th in red zone targets among wide receivers with 13 red zone targets on the year. That's 2 more than Cooper Kupp has.
Dude, and wide receiver 60 right now, man. He's moving on up.
Well, something terrible. Yeah. But look, the opportunities are there. And if at some point later on in the year they can establish some kind of rapport, if he can get on the same page with Stafford, then it's possible that he can still bounce back to some extent. And again, look, I'm not saying to go out and pay up for Allen Robinson, but people are just looking to get rid of him, get him off their rosters. And for a 3rd-round rookie pick, I'd be willing to take that upside swing.
John, there's two guys
Yeah.
I want. You're
Yeah.
playoff John sometimes, and there's
That's
two
right.
guys here that I think you can have for a 24 first or a 23 second plus, who are 30 years old but they ball out. First one is, I think you have to buy DeAndre Hopkins. If you can
Yeah.
get him for a 24 first, I would do it in a heartbeat. I would not pay a 23 first for DeAndre Hopkins at this point, but I think he is a much cheaper, equal upside to a Devontae Adams that you're going to get. You could even trade, if you're trying to stay in that same area, Devontae for Hopkins plus. But Hopkins looks to be the apple of Kyler Murray's eye right now. And then you got to look at, I can't, it bothers me that he hasn't played there, but Keenan Allen's not going to need an IR stint. I think he's going to be okay as a wide receiver 2 when he comes back. This is one that I love Keenan Allen. It has really broken my heart that he has not been able to get out there on the football field. But I think both guys, I think you can get Keenan for a 23 second at this point,
right.
or a 24 first for DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Keenan is we know the talent's there, and he's kind of said, look, I want to come back and be 100%. So he's taking his time with it at this point in his career, but he should be there for the fantasy playoffs, and that's the point. And you can buy him for cheaper than Nuke right now because of the recency bias.
And
so I get that.
Tennessee, he gets the Rams, he gets Miami in that area, and I think those are some tasty matchups.
Yeah. But Nuke for sure. And I love this one because I already traded you in Smash 1 for Nuke, and I went with my 25 first, second, third. And so
Skoranek? Come on.
Yeah, and Skoranek. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, no disrespect. But since that trade, a lot of validation. Nuke right now is number 4 in fantasy points per game on average.
Yep.
And for the fantasy playoffs in the final, he gets Atlanta, who is dead last against wide receivers in terms of fantasy points given up per game. We talked about Hollywood. I agree with Monk. I think they're going to really move it around. I even like Zach Ertz. I think all these guys are pretty decent buys right now. He's also number 4 in fantasy points per game. Number 4. What I'm looking at in smash settings. Yeah. And he's got a nice playoff schedule ahead of him too. He's still a cheap buy. So like those for sure.
And this is the last thing I want to comment on is I have so many people and Mung, I think back to a podcast you and I did last year where we just talk about hold that first until it's time. And everyone's like, when is it time? Is it time to start doing it now? And I think my comment to that is if it is buying a wide receiver or a young upside running back, sure. I bought Kenneth Walker 2 weeks ago for a 23 first, and I brought A.J. Brown for a 23 first. I am not buying Derrick Henry for a 23 first right now unless it is absolutely late. I'm not buying a Dalvin Cook for that 23 first now. But, Mung, talk to me a little bit about when that time is, right? Like, I know it's different for every single team, but for me, it's like I don't want the risk of losing those guys for more than 3 weeks before the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think we're getting down to the wire, right? Because, again, you guys know your leagues best, and it's somewhat dependent because in some of the more active leagues, someone might trade for those players before you if it's another contender. So you don't want to run that risk. So you have to balance that risk assessment with, is someone else going to trade for the player that I'm looking to get? And 2, am I truly a contender, right? Again, I talked at the beginning of the show where look closer than just your record. How many points have you scored? How many points have been scored against you? Are you truly a contender? If you feel confident that you really are, a locked-in playoff team with strong hopes at a title run, then I'm okay with pulling the trigger, now for a guy like Henry or, it's still risky because of how talented this class is. John knows more than any of us, but at the same time, it's not going to be any less risky in 2 to 3 weeks, right? You can say, I'm minimizing the risk of someone getting hurt before I pay this first round rookie pick. But at the same time, players, whether it's a running back, wide receiver, whoever, can twist an ankle whenever. They can fall wrong, be landed on wrong, and we just have no control over that. So I think we're already in the point of the season where if you feel comfortable that you're a strong contender, I'm okay with making those moves at this point.
Good insight, John. I mean, same thing.
Yeah.
I know this is a question we get all the time, and
Yep.
for me, it's like, I've had that offer where when this trade started, I was going to get Derrick Henry for the 107. That guy's lost 4 weeks in a row, and now that's the 103. And now I'm like, could you imagine giving up Gibbs for Derrick Henry and not winning at all? And you have to plan it. You have to get creative and try
You really
to offer
do.
that 24 first. I feel like that's the win. Is like, you know what? I'll give you a 24 first and a 23 second and try to play it off in their head because this class is special.
Yeah, for sure. So I like what Mung gave for the advice, though. You got to know your teammates. You got to know the way the league has typically operated around the playoffs. When did the trade start going down? Picture yourself at a poker table, right? If you've got a hand and you want to go and take down this pot, you got to read the table, right? If everybody's just checking, you might get away with just sitting on the hand for a minute and not revealing anything. But, when someone initiates action, makes a bet, then you might have to do something about it, right? So if somebody puts the guy on the block and finally gives up on the season and that Derrick Henry's out there, you might have to quickly make a bet or play a little defense and go grab the guy, right? But that's the whole key here. Because you could do a check raise and come over the top and take down the pot and ultimately take down a championship. So you want to wait if you possibly can, but if you're starting to get nervous, don't be the guy kind of left holding those cards, right? That's the key.
So ultimately what all three of us are saying is message us. We'll help you out. We'll try to break it down there for you.
There you go.
But guys, great podcast. It's always fun when it's the three of us. You get the band back together. Next week we will be launching kind of a side project here. Fantasy Nerd Boys and at JB Undershepherd have been doing a great job jumping in on the podcast. They're going to kind of, along with myself, just doing a secondary pod called, we're talking about
Let's
Panic
go.
Button. We're gonna try something new and then let those guys run with it. And that's where it's really cool seeing those guys in the Patreon really evolve from fantasy owner to analyst, if you will. You know what I mean? Like getting them into a different level. And
Dynasty kids, you're the dad, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Just
raising
watch
kids
them grow up.
There, So, Mung, why don't you tell everybody what you're working on, where they can find you, and then we'll kick it over to you, John, and then I'll do my thing.
Yeah, awesome. Like I said, I just updated all my Dynasty rankings. You can find those over at fantraxhq.com. And you guys can find me at FFA_Mung. That's MENG. And I'll leave you with just this. Going back real quick to Geno Smith and about how John was saying, there's a fairly decent chance that Smith could even be the starter in Seattle for the next few years. Right now, I know they've had a fairly easy early season strength of schedule, but per player profiler, Geno Smith ranks first in accuracy rating, first in true completion percentage, fourth in red zone accuracy, third in deep ball accuracy, first in clean pocket accuracy, and first in accuracy under pressure. I mean, those are near MVP numbers. And so for anyone who hasn't really been watching the Seahawks games, he's been crisp with his reads. He's made mistakes here and there, but he's been hitting very great deep downfield passes to Metcalf and Lockett. He's mobile. He's been scrambling. He's running. I think as of right now, I'd be willing to pay even the 201 or 202 in Superflex for Geno Smith. I'm not going to pay it first because there's still a lot of season left, but this is how good Geno Smith's been.
Okay.
Dude, Mung at the 104 minute mark, just bringing the heat.
Bringing it, dropping it. Listen to the end, folks. Gotta listen to the end.
You don't want to miss it.
Yeah. Well, so definitely enjoyed chopping it up with you guys and getting some of this advice. I'm taking notes here too. Always learn a lot from you guys, and I love that. And I hope everyone enjoyed the show tonight. You can find me at Dynasty_trades. Hit me on the DMs with the contending teams and the trades you're looking at. But also, as it's been said a couple times, I've been putting out ranks for the 2023 class, and I'm actually even looking at the 2024 class. That's what I'm going to leave you with. I understand that it's getting really pricey on those 23 firsts. Be shopping for the 2024 firsts. Class is looking good. I can help you with value, so reach out anytime.
Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the process.